Good evening, and we are live. Welcome to Omi Inca's production studio. You've got your Omi Inca live this evening on a Thursday. Welcome to the show. And what did the five civilized tribes have to do with our enslavement? I hope that I can't see my advertisement. I'll change it later if I have to. Anyway, I'd like to continue my discussion of where I left off in my research and getting information about our indigenous nature and who were the freedmen and why were they named in the treaty. Let me take you back, first of all. There was a treaty that was set up by the government in 1866. Now, let me say this for the record. Now, this is just my opinion, but I do not believe that slavery could have existed without the full participation of these five civilized tribes. And just who were they? And they were, by my research, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creed, and Seminole. Okay? And those were the five civilized tribes heavily because they owned slaves also. As a matter of fact, after the Civil War, those five tribes continue to own slaves. So they were in this new treaty of the 1866 treaty that they came up with. They saw that these five tribes were not being civilized to blacks, free blacks, and the freedmen. Now, let me tell you something. When you hear the word freedmen, don't think of those are free slaves. Yes, they had school buildings, and there were buildings all around that the freedmen bureau wanted them to attend. It was made to believe as if they were going to school, getting education. But let me tell you something. Those particular schools were not schools of education, but miseducation. As a matter of fact, there could have been something called brainwashing, conditioning them in a Jim Crow law after the fact of coming out of slavery. They were further conditioning them. Remember when you heard that it took 63 or 65 years to make a slave? Those freedmen's schools were where they were conditioning the people psychologically and helping them to get prepared to go into a Jim Crow type of slavery. So the government started feeling misty-eyed and concerned and finally told those civilized tribes, you're going to have to give them some land, 160 acres to be exact. You're going to have to give them some cash, $150 to be exact. And you're going to have to give them the option of whether or not they want to join your tribal groups. And you're going to have to make them tax exempt. In other words, you're going to have to make them like a free citizen. Do you know that these five civilized tribes, according to my research, did not want to share in the wealth of any of these freedmen, free blacks, and slaves? There were different kinds of people here. You must remember that there were runaway slaves who were not freed that stayed with the five tribes, and there were actually freed black people who had finished slavery and who had their free papers. And then there was these freedmen that were going to this free school where they were psychologically condensing them, changing their mindset, and using psychology on them. It wasn't a school that taught them the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Don't let them fool you. they were further conditioning our people to believe that they had a right to be in slavery and they didn't have a right to land. Now, some of them were waking up and they were saying, wait a minute, if I got 160 acres of land, $150, by God, I'm ready to rock and roll. Give me my reparation right now. But the government soon saw that these people wanted in on the deal with the natives who got the full casinos and the whole bit and the land, and they had reparation. They wanted in on it. Government said, we can't have this. We can't have this. We need to do something. So they did do something. Somebody sent out a decree and a letter that said, how can we stop these blacks from asking for their reparation? What must we put on them now to further indict them, to make them believe that they are not the authentic indigenous people? They said, I'll tell you what, we'll put on them the new requirement, you must have a certain amount of quantum of blood, at least a quarter of quantum of black blood. How are you going to prove this? They weren't able to prove that. So a number of those Native Americans, by blood marriages or by blood birth or through drafting themselves into a marriage, went on as if they didn't have enough blood quantum, native indigenous blood, so therefore they could not reap the benefits of the reparation. They were stealing our reparation away. And they were telling the natives to tell them they just don't have enough quantum native blood. So they cannot participate in the full festivities of the reparation, the 160 acres, the $150, and the mule, and to be exempt from taxes. So here, once again, their reparation gets thrown into the wind just like a vapor. And that letter came along stating that if you cannot test for blood quantum and have the proper amount of blood, Native indigenous, you cannot qualify to be a Native American, a Copper Indian. Now, half of the Indians, 95%, were white already and had no quantum blood in them, but were passing for Native indigenous people because they had bought into the dollar Indian. Now, mind you now, the government created these freedmen, making you think that these were the freed African Americans who came out of slavery, when in fact they was putting them back into slavery by sending them to these schools that you see on these photographs where they have freedmen written on there as if the freedmen was now allotting these people to free education, and it's a lie. It's a lie from the pit of hell. There was no education going on in there. There was a brainwashing going on, telling them why they should stay as sharecroppers, why they should stay as unfreed people and go under the freedmen law, and we still will hand you a little something on the table. We're not going to make you a full Copper Indian because you can't prove blood quantum, but we will say you're part Native, indigenous by virtue of marriage, and we'll give you a little something on the side, but you cannot walk around with your card-carrying membership saying that you're an indigenous person and you qualify for all the benefits. So they, in fact, created two types of Native American. Those that were being brainwashed and told them that they didn't have enough quantum blood, they were called the freedmen, and those who were the copper-toned Indian. Now, and most of them were 95% white. So in other words, they worked a deal on us. The Indians, the Native American Indians, those 5 tribes got together with those white $5 Indians and worked a deal on us and took our reparation. Don't believe it? Look in the book, it's there. Research it, it's there. And they're still saying we have got to prove blood quantum, a quarter of percentage of native blood, before you can be a member of a tribe or receive the reparation. We got to go for it, people. You know why we got to go for it? Because a group of idiots got together and they wrote on us. And they created that letter stating we'll put this decree out to stop them from trying to get their birthright, to stop them from trying to ask for their position as a copper-toned Indian. Now we're going to create the fact that they don't have enough blood quantum to qualify for an indigenous person, when in fact we know that it was the black people who were the original indigenous people, and those who bought into it with their $5 were no more native than a man in the moon. They just bought them a place there, and they governed our seat, and they're still sitting in our seat, along with those 5 civilized tribes. Don't think that those 5 civilized tribes love you and that you're their brother and they're ready to say, come on in, brother. Come on in, brother. It's been a long time. Have a sit down. You are our brothers. You are our people. No. They were riding on us, and they came up with the decision to cut us out of the deal as the original people by calling us a counterfeit. We could not sub anything nor be counterfeit. But yet they've counterfeited us. What we really should be worried about is taking those 5 civilized tribes and bringing them into a judicial system and challenging them on the mere basis that we're just as indigenous as they are, and taking our seat right alongside them and letting them know we're aware of the deal that went down at the 1866 treaty. You did not want to give us our lot, and a treaty had to be formed in order to make those 5 civilized tribes, Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creed, and Seminole, mandating them to give us something in the way of 160 acres and a mule, 150 cash dollar bills, and exempt from taxes, and an option of whether or not we wanted to join the tribes. None of that happened because those 5 civilized tribes withheld that from us. They're still walking to this day, proud and arrogant, and making us think that they were trying to make a way for us black people to enter their tribes when they know they're lying. They were forcing us out till the government had to come in and offer up a treaty. So what do we do about it? Now that we know who the real enemy is, why aren't we talking about challenging them to find out why? Why would they let us stay on their land, use us to crop their fields, use us to fight the war with, and then try to enslave us, and don't want to let us go nor to give us our birthright? We need to talk about those 5 civilized tribes. We need to find out just why they were trying to talk us out of our birthright, and why did they let the man, Mr. Enforcer, put on a pale face, come in with his $5 bill and buy a spot in our position. And we're still talking about don't hold a grudge, and it's just not us, it's other people other than the white people. Well, we keep letting people off free all over the place. It seems like we're letting more than just the white man off. Now we're letting the indigenous so-called Native American off, when in fact, he was the cause of us being in a second type of slavery called Jim Crow. He was the cause of us not getting our reparation, and all other nations have gotten their reparation. The Japanese, the Germans, the Chinese, and the Vietnamese, all of them have gotten their reparation. We did a show on it. We talked about it. But what I want to make you conscious of is that you have another arch enemy out there. And it's not just the white man. is somebody that's in cahoots with the white man on probation to become a Native American. Not a white this time, but a Native American, because a deal has been worked with those 5 civilized tribes that they will always have land, they will take proceeds off the casinos, and they will run the black people out and prevent them from even being able to declare their national heritage, and prevent them from even being able to identify with the Copper-Tone Indian when we're the blackest thing on this earth. Yes, we got to get it correct. There's a lot of us out there trying to define what's going on, but we also have to point some fingers and say who was involved in it. Now, anytime somebody goes and put on a red face and a headdress and bring back a $5 and hand you that, it's a pretty low gesture, I would say, because they're taking something that don't belong to them. And one thing we must always say, we don't want anything that don't belong to us. We want what's rightfully ours. And what we have to look at in this situation, not just being a part of their powwows and getting into their meetings and carrying their card, but getting in on the MONEY, because there is oil on this land, on these lands, and it's pouring in, and people that are Native American descent are getting their profit and their share all over the continent. Why would you leave out a people that was the first chosen one and the indigenous people? Why would you leave us out and say we had nothing common? Why would you even have a meeting amongst those higher 5 civilized tribes to make them think that they're the only indigenous people here on this earth, and to give them that kind of authority, knowing that us black people have been beaten out of every opportunity and every deal? I say we have a meeting. I say we have a meeting with those so-called indigenous Native Americans and those so-called $5 Indians, and lay it down on the table, and let's just cut through the chase. We're not trying to say who did it, white or black. We're trying to get the right person that wrote that letter and that made sure that African Americans got no part of their reparation. We want to trace it back to who even wrote it on the ink. Why was it written, and why is it now still adhered to? And what can we do to get our proper share back? Because just determining that we're Native American is not enough. It's got to be some monetary gains attached to it. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. Now, some of us think as long as we know we're a member of something, oh, we're a part of something, oh, how great it is to be a part of something, it does not meet the mark, because we got to beat the band this time. We got to get over the grain house, and we got to get some of the share of the resources of the land. For all these years, we've missed out on our dividends of the oil proceed of the natural material products that were produced on the land that rightfully belongs to the indigenous people, the black people. So we keep having all these hearings, but the biggest hearing in court should be to decide, do the African Americans meet the qualification of blood quantum, and are they entitled to their share of the lot of the land when the 1866 treaty was broken? Can we recreate a new treaty to reinforce the one that they stole from us? It's documented about the letter that was written so that we wouldn't go after our status as a Native American because we could not prove, you thought, blood quantum. One thing you must understand, yes, these 5 tribes go around pompous and proud, but there's no room on their pulliam for a black indigenous aboriginal. There's no room at their concerts when they go to and talk about their ancestors and discuss how they go up into the sweat lodges to bring down the blessings on them. Well, be careful that you're not bringing down some curses, because everything that is hidden will eventually come to light, and the doors are being opened, and the way is perfect and clear for African Americans who could not read, who you kept dumb, stupid, and blind. Their eyes are now open now, and they're able to see you not only with their visual eyes, but with their third eye. And be careful that you are not going to be the one that be chasing for the deeds that you didn't do. You called us your brother. You called us into your home. You let us slave for you, but you did not tell us of our heritage and our position and our place, and you did not give us our lot and share of the gainful material that exists on God's abundant earth. There is much to be afraid of. And I will say this much. All of the speakers that are researching now, and we have now discovered that this has happened. It's time for chastisement now. We don't have to keep debating over who's right and who's wrong. Whoever got to the information first, fine. Let's talk about what's the next phase. The next phase is all the damage that was done in those freedmen school has to be reversed, because that was a brainwashing. If I ever saw a brainwashing, we must reverse the brainwashing and retell the truth of who the real indigenous aborigines are. And yes, everything in that treaty belonged to us. It's time to shower us with those gifts. It's time to bring those 40 acres and a mule and hand them out front. It's time to get that $150 and multiply it by 70 times 7 and hand it over to your brothers and sisters. It's time to exempt every tax that we have on the record. And if anyone's been placed in prison for not paying taxes, it's time for you to pay them back through reparation, pardoning them publicly, handing them their share of the tax-exempt money. It's time for you to open up your doors for membership to any one of us who would like to write our lifetime membership on your records with all full benefits at a premium level. Oh, we know how to fix this thing. You keep saying that it ain't possible to give reparation. We're not talking about reparation now. We're talking about the past due treaty that you overturned and that wasn't enforced. And we're talking about, now that we know we don't have to prove blood quantum. By virtue of our red burnt skin, it tells you that green blood flows through us, which comes out as red blood. And we have the quantum. We have the quantum. So we no longer have to prove it. So stop trying to prove blood quantum with these people. Stop trying to go on air and defend them because they've done so much wrong. We must find the perpetrator and bring them out front. We can no longer shield them and say, well, we don't want to just bring the perpetrator, the whites, because there were other people. We're not trying to do that, but we know who had control of this treaty and who should have reinforced it. Yes, those 5 civilized tribes must be chastised, and now they must share in the benefits of their tribes. They must. They simply cannot go on barring Black people from their organization because they cannot prove blood quantum. It must not be a criteria to get into these tribes. So we are going to have to come head on with this thing. All of us who are researching out here, and we've been talking about this, there's a lot wrong. We don't have legal systems to help our Black men and women. We don't have membership and full membership into these organizations that house our meetings, that talk about our nature and that talk about our tradition as a native. So we as Aboriginals are going to have to take the lead. Take the lead. Take the lead. Whoever takes the lead, people will follow. Go out front and take the lead and stop apologizing to these so-called low-life people whose morals have dropped below the level of a human being. And now you want to apologize to them, saying that we're not pointing the finger at just you. We don't have to point the finger at anyone. You put a dirty glass up against a clean one, it will condemn itself. So stop the pleading for pardoning people. It's not time to pardon anyone. Let God himself come into the room and he will make the decision at which just punishment is worthy to claim over all of these fools that tried to take us for a ride. Oh yes, there were many involved. As I told you, those five civilized tribes and the white man too. He was the one created and concocted this deal to make sure that we weren't in on it and never got our lot. Yes, he must be chastened and he must be addressed, just as well as the red and the yellow man who perpetuated being the first world indigenous people when they know we were, but they cut us out of the deal. We're going to have to let a few people know that this year we're going to start off a little bit differently. We're not going to be crying the blues about reparation. We are going to lay the evidence on the table. This requires the evidence. All of you researchers, let's just lay the evidence on the table. And it will convict those who feel like they cannot measure up. But we cannot go on any longer trying to point the finger at which one is the one that perpetrated, which one is not the innocent one. We're not into that. All we're trying to do is excuse a bunch of criminals from what they have done. We cannot excuse anyone. We don't have that authority, but we can point out what went wrong and what wasn't right. And we can say that we are definitely truly aware of this now. We are aware of this now. Thank you very much. And when you become aware of something, you make others aware of it. For some reason, it is so, okay. We must understand that we spent a lot of time and energy talking about who were the indigenous Aboriginals. We've discovered that now. We know it is not such a thing as a Black Indian, but the indigenous people of color. And we know that these so-called people who came into the picture, who were not actually indigenous people, have reaped our benefits. They've walked away with our lot, and they have not had any remorse, and they've passed down our legacies to their children. Now, God said he will make a show of them openly. Sounds like the right thing to do. To make a show of them openly would be no reason to for admitting, because the writing will be on the wall. But we spent a lot of time doing research, finding out if we should go and have our DNA swiped just to prove our blood quantum. We don't have to prove that. By virtue of your black skin represents that you are one of the indigenous aborigines. And those pale skinned people who are carrying non melanite, those may be the ones that want to go and have the swab DNA test to determine just how much quantum black blood they have in them. And if they cannot prove it, they will have to step down from their positions. Now, we've got to work smart and not hard. And we're working far too hard out here trying to justify those who participated. We know there were 5 tribes and they were civilized. They had the ability to use cunning mechanisms and skills and to work with the white man to get us out of our position and off our square and to rob us of our birthright. So we must understand that this is a trick of the devil, and it's been going on for a long, long time now. It's been going on for such a long, long time that we've allowed this thing, and we don't know how to stop it now. It's sort of like a snowball that's been rolling, and it's gone and gained so much momentum, and it's very hard to stop it at the speed that it's going. But we got to jump on it with both feet and hold it down and hold it accountable for the dirt and the problems that has caused a race of people for more than 400 years. The suffering that has gone on because we didn't know our birthright has been unacceptable. And everyone that thinks that they're working by the sweat of their brows, there's no reason to exclude you. You've said that we could do it for ourselves. Well, God left us a birthright, and he left us land to live on without struggling all the days of our life for that land. He left that for us. He didn't mean for us to work this hard as we work. Someone stole that from us, and they have our bowl of porridge. They're eating theirs and ours too, and we want it back. And we want to make it plain that we are the indigenous African people. We must always keep the word African on there, because that is what we are ascending from, and that is what we gained our strength from. We cannot abandon it now at this time. We must remain African, indigenous aborigines, and connect to our African brothers. But we must also take our land back that's here in the United States, and we must let them know we are well aware of what went on at that treaty, and we're well aware of the fact that they stole something from us. And just because they sent us to those freedmen schools and they thought they were educating us, they were miseducating us and blinding us and psychologically deranging our mind. But we've got our minds back now. We are conscious and we're well aware of what is going on. And thanks to God, we can come and let you know that we can never be taken like that again. Because now that we know the story, that there was a freedman bureau that came in and miseducated our people, psychologically deranging them and preparing them and conditioning them for the second slavery called Jim Crow. And right out of slavery, after the Civil War, you put our people back in slavery again to only live through peony and to allow the immigrants to come in and take their land, take all of their lots and all of their reparation, and made to train those particular immigrants how to crop the land. We know that now. So we got to stop so much talking and do something about it. It's time to hold some meetings now. Meeting at the building gonna soon be over, soon be over, soon be over. The meeting at the building gonna soon be over. All over this land, I said now, all over this land, my children, all over this land, I said now, all over this land, now children, all over this land, I said the meeting at the building gonna soon be over, soon be over, soon be over. The meeting at the building gonna soon be over, all over this land. That's right. There's gonna be a meeting at the building, and it's gonna soon be over all over this land, because people are waking up and they're realizing you cannot lay down on their inheritance. You cannot take their lot and pass it on to your legacy. You must free the land. Free the land. Free the land. The land has called out to us because there was blood shed on that land, and the blood cries out. And when the blood cries out, you must free the land. The land has to be freed and give it back to those circumstances of people who have been waiting so patiently. They must receive their 160 acres and a mule and the $150, which we will actually magnify and triple, so that now that they are not just getting the 160 acres and the $150, they are getting more than what they have bargained for, because the riches of the wicked are going to be laid up for the just. And we are just waiting to be blessed. And for those of you who are speaking on the subject of discovering our heritage and our indigenous status, I would like to thank you. Let's come together in a group so we can point out the fact that there's work for all of us to be doing, and work that all of us must do in order to prepare for this year's celebration and reunion, because we are now out of slavery over 400 years. It's time for us to do something with the knowledge we do have about the status and our position as an Aboriginal African indigenous people. And we must prepare our youth to be able to embrace this particular heritage. But we've got to start somewhere, and we can't keep fretting over the same topic and the discussion. We must look at the fact that now it's time for us to sit down and to negotiate. Are you in the negotiation business? Are you ready to talk about it? You can put your easel and your overhead up now. We can close down the books. We don't need to preach to the choirs anymore. We need to go into the courtrooms and sit down and negotiate. It's negotiation time. And I think you should be prepared for that, because if you're not, they will draw up another treaty, which they don't intend to keep. There'll be no more treaties that are drawn up that will go along the wayside. No more treaties. We will not accept no more treaties that are not backed with gold. It's going to be backed with blood so that it'll be reinforced. And we know that our blood quantum is strong enough. And we might have to bleed a little bit to lay down our blood quantum to let you know our blood is strong. Our blood is strong, and the life of the flesh is in the blood. Our blood is strong. And we must understand that there will be no more marches. We're not going to have to march up and down the streets no more and set fires to our own property and tear down our own stores in our own community. We're not going to have to say Black Lives Matter anymore, but indigenous Aboriginal lives are what matter. Because we're not going to fall in a category like Virginia put us in of all colored folks or white folks. There's no such thing as colored folk, and there is no black in the rainbow. So we will answer to Aboriginal, indigenous African people that we are. We're the first world people. And we have not forgotten about Africa land, Arcadia land, because that land we will reap from as well. But it's very vital that you should understand that Africa gives us a strong disposition because they can bargain with us because we have the authority to be over some land and outside of this continent, and they will want to negotiate with us. And we don't have to beg them to come into the courtroom. We can only summons them there and offer them once or twice. Gone once, gone twice, gone. Sold to the highest bidder, the indigenous, aboriginals, African people. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And do soar ahead, straight ahead and into the future. Avon, Indiana, straight ahead and into the future. Gary, Indiana, straight ahead and into the future. Detroit, Michigan, straight ahead and into the future. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, straight ahead and into the future. Dallas, Texas, straight ahead and into the future. Odabo and Baba Booey to you, y'all. Have a great evening.